we're moving on. So I have started looking at table calculations a little bit and sort of like the spreadsheetification of our table calcs. I'm showing mostly just like back like code that I have a temporary front end for. So this is not at all what it will look like or how it will work, but I wanted to show off the mechanics that are working, which is kind of cool. So like I threw a little box in here for creating calculations for the time being. So like I can, reference A1, which would be this, and create a calculation that's just like basically like an across the row here, but I can also add that to B2, so, or well, B1, sorry, add that to its neighbor. So now like I'm adding the first two columns. This is the equivalent of doing something like sum A1, B1 too. So like I could do this instead. It's kind of, you can see what it's doing up here is that we're basically using the ones and twos to uh you like do offsets. So if instead I wanted to sum A1 and A2, whoop, um, then I could sum like it would be summing itself and the one after it, for example. Um, what else would be interesting to show? I think Ariel said this might be interesting. So like if I wanted to create a new column that was like an offset of a week, oops, B, let's do B. Then I could do like this week's sales versus last week's sales on this day, something like that. Um, the other thing you could do, I guess, is like if I wanted to do B1 divided by B0, that's like the I think that's like that would be like a percent of previous virtually. The big problem with these numbers right now is that I don't have the percentage set, so it's rounding them, but the number there is actually correct. Um, so the like spreadsheet thing is kind of working, like it's starting to come together, but it's still very early days and there's a lot of work to do. I think, oh, I guess like you can, I what works today is like concat. We could do concat. Oh, also I don't have to do the B. I could do like users dot first name, users dot gender if I wanted to here. Whoop, I gotta spell it right though. Um, which would be the equivalent of concat, you know, what C1, B1, and D1. So should basically keep it as the same calculation. Anyway, so that's where this is headed. Um, all the interactions and the UI and all that is TBD and in the future, but the actual spreadsheet calculations part of it that actually builds like interesting calculations under the hood using our parsed SQL expressions is well underway. So that's pretty cool.
So cool.
That is so freaking cool.
It doesn't
With
support
the
$ A1 syntax, does it, Richard? Like $A, $1?
It will. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. That's all the stuff I'm working on.
Very cool. Yeah, that would be neat.
would it also include autocomplete in the future for the columns?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, you're not going to be typing in some box above the table, although there may be a box above the table, sort of like you see in, Sheets or Excel. But I think ultimately the idea is, click into a cell for a new, like create a new column, click into the cell, and then we'll let you click around the table, like click on this one to auto populate and things like that. And obviously, like type ahead is a huge one. So I have an issue open for type ahead for like pulling out the calculations and all that. I mean, that stuff, it's just gonna like, it's a ways out. So I'm just showing off stuff that'll be not be available for a while.
So cool. Yeah, but just to reiterate, like if we can make this the get data from the database as good as it is right now with this mix of SQL and UI, and then we can make the do stuff with data from the database as sort of simple and straightforward as this, we have something just incredibly powerful and magical. Like it's kind of scary, but like even what we just demoed is probably easier for most people that use Looker to make calculations than what Looker currently does. Like pretty much anyone would be able to go touch that function bar and do stuff, which is crazy to think about.
I also just really like, to our earlier conversation, Colin, like I really like how it creates a different like modality for table calc. So like, you know, you need to know the difference between a table calc and a push down calc, and it's a very clear separation because of how it works in the syntax.
What is a pushdown calc?
Like you know, a dimension or a measure, like something in the table.
Yeah, I mean, or you could also the way to think about it is like in its most simple form, there's write SQL, then write Excel on top of SQL. Any of the things that we do in Excel on top of SQL, we could translate into a SQL function. So you could just do it in a single pass called write SQL. Like we almost want to give that as a toggle to the user. That's like, I want this all to compile in the database and just run in one shot. But like canonically, probably what we want to do is run SQL and then run things on top of it that can break, that can sort of extend, that don't need to touch the SQL or go back to the database. But there is translation that we can do back and forth.
Yeah, right. Like you could have a philosophical argument about whether that should be the way people want to do things, but I think the practicality is like everyone knows how to export shit to Excel and do that. So like it's a very ingrained and understood behavior.
Well, and like, what's the utility? Like, what do people get if they want to push it back? It's probably like reusability or something. So like, if I want to, what do I want to do with it is probably what would guide you.
Potentially like speed, scalability, you could repackage it. Like if we chain these things together, maybe you want them going through fewer layers, but ultimately like get the data back and then run calcs on top gives you isolation. And isolation is really, really powerful. Like I write a bad function, it doesn't blow up my query. It doesn't take 10 minutes to go run the query. It operates on top of a really small data set and does a really known thing.